I would now like to begin part 2 of this presentation of Shomenuchi techniques. I would like to demonstrate the second group of Irimi techniques. I believe we are perhaps the only group who practices Irimi in this way. Irimi is usually done like this. The sword is a bladed weapon. In karate, it is called uchi hidari ode. We refer to it as the mine, or back of the ken. In karate, it is referred to as soto hidari ode. This is completely different. When the opponent attacks our head, we execute the technique this way. We do it this way, moving like this. When we do the technique, we absolutely do not do it in this way. In our training, we absolutely do not push back at the opponent. In dealing with an attack in Aikido, we do not block or stop our opponent. That is how an attack is dealt with in Aikido. So in Aikido, we do not move from this point in the direction of the opponent. We open this way. The hand comes to here in this manner and enters this way. Naturally, if Aikido is based on the principles of the sword, it must be based on correct principles. Various entering movements with the sword begin from this form, where both opponents raise the sword at the same time and parry the opponent's attack. Then from this position, they enter, and their swords lower. But our way of doing the movement is different. We do not adopt a kamae or ready posture, we simply stand like this, so we can enter when the opponent lowers his sword. Naturally, we can enter directly from here. This is our way of executing Irimi. We have already entered at this point. In this case of a usual punch, we can avoid it, but we don't do it this way. What we do when the opponent punches is to enter directly. We are in this position. If you do it this way, the opponent will not fall down. In our way of doing the technique, when he attacks with shomen, we enter like this from below. So when he comes with a punch, we enter here directly. So naturally, this hand can't attack me either. He can't build up this point, so it doesn't endanger his life. He becomes unable to utter a word. I will return to this point later. This is what atemi should be. This is what atemi should be in Japanese martial arts. That is the method of entering we use. This is how we execute Irimi. Next, using this as the basis, we will present Kotegaishi, Nikyo, and Sankyo. Now we will move on to the practice of Kotegaishi. This kotegaishi is exactly the same as the irimi we did earlier. We use the same movement as we did for the irimi we did before. There is almost no difference between this and the earlier irimi. Now we will take a look at this technique with Ken versus Ken and Ken versus Jo. Now we will move on to Shomenuchi Nikyo. With this technique as well, there are Ken versus Ken, Ken versus Jo, and sword drawing techniques. We performed this Nikyo in a manner similar to the irimi and kotegaishi we looked at earlier. Here, and then we turn. It's almost the same movement. We will now move on to the Ken versus Ken and Ken versus Jo techniques. Allow me to explain this a little. The Jo is in this position, and we break the opponent's jaw. Naturally, a strike here follows. However, we can't practice in this way. So we parry to his head to subdue him. This is how it's done. Then we come here. This Jo movement is similar to the Nikyo. The same form directly applies to the sword. We come here and then enter. It is exactly the same as before. Next, we come here from below. It is almost the same as the empty-handed movement. The empty-handed technique applies to the Ken and to the Jo. Now we look at the third type of irimi. In this irimi, the opponent strikes my head and I come here. I have already entered. I don't allow him to strike. When he strikes, we come to this position. This is the position. This is irimi nage. There are a number of ways of entering. There are various kinds of footwork. The one now is like this. So we come like this. In actuality, this is the sword raising. This comes here. If he punches, I come to his throat. Usually the hand is used to protect yourself. However, in Aikido this is not done. The hand which comes into contact with the opponent is used to draw him out. This is the opposite of other kinds of martial arts. Japan's modern martial arts involve pinning, parrying, and pushing away. This has spread from Japanese martial arts all over the world. Our approach to Aikido is completely the opposite. The hand which makes contact is used to draw out the opponent. We don't use it to throw. That is the way it's done in Aikido. In the case of the punch too, the hand is not used to stop the attack. We use this hand to draw out the opponent. At this point, my strike has already contacted him. Without an understanding of this, I don't think one can understand the wonderful quality of Aikido. Many techniques emerge from these irimi movements. If it is true that you can throw an opponent in an instant, it means you can kill an opponent in an instant. However, today that would be a crime. When that happens in this world, one is killed. Our approach is, in an instant, in that moment of agitation, to cause both parties to reflect on the situation. In the previous Irimi, we entered this way. This time, we enter from the opposite side. This time, it's different. This movement happens instantaneously. This is the movement. This is our way of executing Irimi. According to the principle of Irimi, the opponent is already checked in his attack. That is to say, you have to always be in a position to down your opponent. The opponent cannot attack me. You have to create this situation. It is because of this that it is Aikido. However, in martial arts like Kendo, Judo, or Karate, this principle is probably not understood. That's my view. We will now move on to kotegaeshi. This is exactly the same as the previous Irimi. When he comes to strike my head, then I move my body here. I enter this way. I will now show the previous kotegaeshi and compare it using Ken and Jo techniques. In the previous kotegaeshi, we entered this way. Then we cut here. This time we do the opposite. We enter this way. Of course, this time we attack the opponent's throat. If we down the opponent, then that's the end of the technique. This is how we do it. Like this. Again. In this movement, we attack the opponent's jaw. Then we come here. Next, we attack the jaw. We attack the jaw. The jaw, like this. This is the kotegaeshi we are doing now. Now we will consider Sankyo techniques. There are two ways of doing Sankyo. We will divide it into two kinds and also show applications using the Ken and Jo. This Sankyo is almost the same as the basic movement. It's done this way. Then we come here. The importance of this basic movement is that it illustrates that atemi must be used in Aikido throwing and pinning techniques. Generally speaking, people do not understand these techniques. In a real situation, as I said before, we attack his head. Then we move this way and control him. This is the movement. In a real situation, this movement becomes a strike here. As to the distance, of course, we move in close in Aikido. Rather than the fist, you often use impi or uraken, that is, reverse strikes. In the old days, it was said that one could knock down an opponent with a 10-centimeter punch. Nowadays, in the karate world, there are very few who can do that. Aikido is supposed to be able to do that too. We have gone to this point. There is barely a space of 10 centimeters. There is no room to execute a punch. But this hand moves this way. It has 10 times the distance to move. The last strike is to a place in the body that cannot be toughened up. Everything needed to fell the opponent is included in this technique. This is the way it is done in Aikido. When looking at Shomenuchi, one might wonder what on earth the technique is. The key elements happen in an instant. The opponent comes here, like this. Actually, he doesn't make contact. In this way, we can cleanly control the opponent. Without doing this, the forward-looking thinking of Aikido to the effect that we can construct a new age by uniting with and leading the opponent's power will never come into being. Aikido is trying to realize an ideal for the future. The present trend is to completely block the future. This is the direction in which present-day Japanese Budo have been moving. Victory is in felling your opponent. In our way of thinking, to fell an opponent is to lose. Man's true way of life is based on protecting the life of fellow man. The purpose of Aikido training is to examine and verify this principle with your own body. Keeping that in mind, this is the manner in which we execute the technique. With the Ken, at this point, actually here, and we enter here. Then we blend with the opponent's sword, and then move here. We have already entered when the opponent raises his sword, and then we move here. Then we blend with his ken. Then we come here. We apply the same principle to the jo. The movement is exactly the same. Since this is a jo, it doesn't cut. At this point, we strike his jaw, and then to the side of his head. Once again. At this point, the opponent strikes and we lead him this way. Here we enter. Before we pin him, we must execute a strike here. Then we pin him here. That is how the technique is executed. Again, we'll show the movement with the ken and jo. First of all, I'll show the first Sankyo sword technique. This is taken from among the thrusting movements. Next, these are of course among the applied techniques. They are done in the manner of the Ikkyo-ura movement. Next, we'll demonstrate the techniques using the Ken and Jo. Naturally, these will be based on ski attacks. It goes without saying that we enter here behind the opponent. We enter this way here, and then here. So it may be a punch or something else. Of course, you must already strike him when he comes. So we do it like this. So this movement comes over the opponent's head. This is the wrong way to do it. That's how they do it in karate. We're doing this to avoid the punch. We have to touch the opponent's body here. Actually, we must down the opponent before touching his fist. Therefore, we must bring our hand over his head. Because my hand is here, he can't punch or kick. So of course, we enter here, and pin. This is how we practice the technique. When using a Ken or Jo, we do the movement against a thrust. Here too, before making contact, we come to his temple, then here, then his body, finally here. Before making contact, we come here, here, and then his arm, then the body, and here. This is a kind of hip training while holding the sword, like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 strikes. This is one way to demonstrate an Aikido technique. It is said that Aikido is a forgiving Budo. There are some people who will forgive once or twice, but there is hardly anyone who can forgive 3, 4, or 5 times. Forgiving is the highest ideal. Aikido is the spirit of one who can forgive many people. We think that this is something very important. If Aikido is a Budo of forgiveness, we must closely examine techniques with that concept in mind. By mastering these techniques, we can develop a tolerant character. This is the purpose of Aikido training. Once again. Since this is a Jo, it can't cut the body. When you're cutting with a live sword, it's effective to cut soft places. But in the case of the Jo, it's effective to strike hard spots. So for example, you strike the knees and places like that with the Jo. This goes without saying. When we use the Ken, we are using a dull blade, so it actually doesn't matter. In the case of both the Ken and Jo, of course, It is more effective than striking with the fist. That is how we approach the technique. To conclude, I would like to briefly explain two shimewaza or choking techniques. It's done like this. To explain this, it's actually not that difficult. You come to this position. In the old days, you did this. If you twisted the helmet, you broke the opponent's neck. This would result in instant death. It's extremely dangerous. Since we can't do that sort of thing, we go through the motion of choking the opponent. Of course, we come to here, and while striking the opponent's jaw, we bring him here. Since we can't do that, we come here. The thumb comes here. Then you twist him around to here. It's necessary to do it this way for practice. Please understand the technique in this way. Here's another technique. This is a similar technique. This time you stay in contact with him and come here. Actually, you would do this. Or poke his eyes. You come into the jaw, and one hand pokes his eyes. It's extremely dangerous. You'll understand if you try pressing here. This is a vital point. If this is cut even a little, air comes gushing out. You can't survive for even a minute. This point here. If you are struck here even with the empty hand, it will be totally effective. So we enter from the left side, and then to here. You shouldn't pull. The opponent is controlled by his own body weight. You don't choke him with your hands. It happens by the opponent's own body weight. It's like being hanged. You are choked by your own body weight. It's the opponent's body weight. That is how we execute the technique. So, we bring him around this way, and he comes to here. I think it's best to practice the technique this way. Today I have limited myself to an explanation of just Shomenuchi techniques. In our practice of empty-handed techniques, we apply the principle espoused by the founder that training in empty-handed techniques is the same as holding a ken or jo. The same principle applies to all martial arts. This is how the founder explained it. I think that is exactly true. If our way of explaining these techniques has been of some use, I hope that you will think about training according to these principles, and that this will be a benefit to the future of Aikido. Those are my thoughts. There are still many Yokomen, Katatedori, Sodedori, and Ryotedori techniques. There are still many other ways of training. If there is the opportunity, I would also like to cover these areas of training. Thank you. In this tape, we will cover Yokomenuchi applications. We use the term Yokomenuchi just as it is employed in the sword arts. It is said that Aikido comes from the sword, but recently there are many people of the opinion that study of the sword is unnecessary in Aikido. However, from my standpoint, as long as Aikido is to be considered as a martial art, its basis is the sword, and I will endeavor to explain these techniques emphasizing the sword in all of its facets. In so doing, we can see the true martial quality of Aikido techniques. One of the most representative techniques of the Yokomenuchi series is Yokomenuchi Shihonage. There are a number of problems with the execution of this technique. I would like to begin by explaining the major differences between the ways this technique is commonly taught and our method of doing Yokomenuchi Shihonage. One of the main problems with this technique is the use of the hand in the basic strike. Most Aikido practitioners stand this way and extend their hands. This is not tegatana, the hand blade. If you were to strike this way, you would just injure your own hand. It shouldn't be done this way. If you are going to use the hand like a sword, you must position your hand as though you are holding a sword. This is the proper way of holding the sword. This is how you hold it. I release my hand. I grasp the sword. This is the correct way of grasping the sword. You must firmly hold the sword with your thumb and little finger. From this position, you can execute the various striking and thrusting movements using the sword. Of course, there are about 12 ways of using the hand, and they all start from here. Hiraken, Ipponken, Seiken. These are the basic forms. It is completely wrong to assume this stance. You must raise your hand straight over your head in order to strike correctly. Most people begin their strike from here, the side of the head. This is proof that a person has not practiced the sword properly. You can't cut anything this way. The Shomen and Yokomen strikes are all the same at this point. It's not done like this. You must first correct this mistake before beginning training with the sword. The next thing is where to strike. People usually execute the Yokomenuchi strike to this point. In a real situation, this is unthinkable. This is very ineffective. No one in a realistic situation on a battlefield would cut here because it is ineffective. It's hard to cut. In a real situation, you must strike to these vital points. That's the way it should be done. Aikido-ka don't close their hands when they strike. Karate practitioners who strengthen their hands don't strike that way. They know it's not effective, so naturally they don't strike that way. So what is the purpose of Aikido-ka who haven't even strengthened their hands striking in such an ineffective way? That's the problem with this way of striking. This is where we strike. Here and here. With the sword, of course, you strike the shoulder. We have made various corrections and developed this way of doing it. The point we strike in our way of executing the Yokomenuchi strike is different from the usual way of doing it. I would like to demonstrate Yokomenuchi techniques with this in mind. This is the difference between our way of doing Shihonage and the way it is done usually. In the usual form of Shihonage, the strike is received. This is the usual Shihonage. This probably describes the way it is done in 99% of the cases in Aikido. This is the way it's usually done in Japan and abroad. It's already been about 35 years since we stopped doing it that way. We have already taken our opponent's initiative. Block and counter. That's the way it's been done in Japanese martial arts for hundreds of years. That's the way it's done in fighting arts everywhere. You can't consider this way of doing it to be Aikido. Aikido doesn't need that way of doing things. You have to have already defeated your opponent before being touched. You can't attempt to grab after being struck. Our way of doing it is to enter, thus preventing him from striking. That's how we execute the movement. Our way of grabbing is different too. Usually people enter like this, using this kind of movement. This is the way it looks from the front. In the usual way, you execute the movement after receiving the strike. We enter directly. The usual way is to first receive the attack and then enter. Our way of doing it is to already take the opponent's mind before receiving the strike. That's how we do it. This is how we enter. Once again. This is how we execute Yokomenuchi Shihonage. Next, let's take a look at Yokomenuchi Iriminage. Already at this stage, we lead the opponent to here. At this stage, we bring him here. Let's now look at Yokomenuchi Kotegaeshi. We will do two variations, and I'll demonstrate the first one now. Like this. Now I'll show the second variation of Kotegaeshi. This time, I won't use this hand very much. I bring him around like this. The reason for this is we are treating it like a punching attack. We already enter. This is how we deal with the punch. We do it this way. Now I'll demonstrate Yokomenuchi Gokyo. There are some problems with Gokyo also. The way this is normally done in the Aikido world, like before, I would say in about 99% of the cases, is this way. This is one of the old ways of doing it in the martial arts world. You block and then enter. We do it differently. In Aikido, we enter with a strike before the opponent's attack reaches us. Usually it's done like this. This way is the beginner's way to do it, and it's not effective. Karate does it this way. Everybody does it this way. We don't have to do such things in Aikido. We have already taken our opponent's mind before he touches us. That is the Aikido way of doing it. We enter before the opponent touches us. This is how we execute the movement. In the case of Gokyo, we hold the jo in the center. We move the jo like this. We move like this. I can't reach him this way. By doing it this way, we can execute the movement freely. We close the distance and enter here. Next, I'll demonstrate Yokomenuchi Nikyo. This movement also is similar to dealing with a tsuki or punch. Naturally, this movement is used. We cut his eyes. Then we apply the pressure. That's what we keep in mind when doing this technique. Next, I'll show Yokomenuchi Irimi. This hand appears to be receiving the attack, but it is not. We enter like this and can execute these atemi strikes. The attacker comes and we can immediately execute atemi. If the attacker comes really hard, we lead him this way. We execute the movement this way against the attack. Now, I'll show two variations of Yokomenuchi Sankyo. This is the first variation. Now, this is the second Sankyo variation. Next, I'll demonstrate Yokomenuchi Koshinage. When he attacks, we execute atemi and take his balance this way. We break his balance with the atemi. Now, I'll demonstrate Yokomenuchi Kotegaeshi. Here the atemi is important. We do it this way. We come in directly from the front. That's how we do it. Recently, we have made certain changes to our way of doing the Yokomen techniques. The reason for this is, as I explained, related to the tegatana or hand blade and the sword. We first do the technique with the ken and then the jo. I'd like to show the changes in the ikkyo, nikkyo, and sankyo techniques. This is shihonage as I have shown earlier. In this way of doing it, we enter here. In this version, we enter in this manner. We use the tegatana at the opponent's throat, and then we proceed. That's the way we perform shihonage. So we enter this way and complete the technique. Now I will show this using the ken. We execute the technique in this manner. Once again. And once more. Next, I'll execute the technique using the jo. This time, since he is coming to cut with a ken, we use the jo like this. We come to his chin and then come here. Instead of cutting with the ken, we strike here with the jo. We do it like this and enter. Now I'll show you the ikkyo techniques done first empty-handed, and then I'll demonstrate various applications using the ken and jo. Now I'll demonstrate Nikkyo, first empty-handed, and applications with the ken and jo. Now I'll show Sankyo, beginning with empty-handed techniques, and then with the Ken and Jo. With this, I would now like to conclude my explanation of our way of executing Yokomenuchi techniques. I will now begin by showing Ryotedori and Sodedori techniques in that order. First of all, we don't normally spend a lot of time practicing Ryotedori techniques in our training. We seldom practice Morotedori or two-handed techniques that are done in the Aikido world because of doubts as to their appropriateness from a martial arts standpoint. Of course, from a martial arts standpoint, a two-hand grab is completely illogical. In a martial arts sense, one should not think in terms of doing a technique after both hands are held. However, the techniques we show today, we do in our training, especially in the beginner's class, and they are part of our 5th Kyu test. In the children's class, we practice them starting from the 10th Kyu level, and in the junior class, from the 5th Kyu level. As it is one of the training requirements for the 5th Kyu examination for beginners, I would like to show some Ryotedori techniques. Now I will show the Ryotedori techniques in order. First, we'll begin with a back stretching exercise. We move like this. You must keep in mind, even in this preparatory exercise, that what we are practicing is Budo. If you allow both hands to be grabbed, you can be kicked. So if you are going to allow both your hands to be grabbed, move this way so that you can't be kicked. This is Iriminage. Here, he can't kick. Here, at this point, you can do this. If you return to the original position, this happens. So in Irimi, when both your hands are grabbed, you are already in this position. If you move like this is what happens. He can't reach me, but I can reach him. Also here, he can't kick me. You must execute the basic Ryotedori this way for it to be effective as a martial art. So these are the basic principles we keep in mind while performing this exercise. Then he takes a forward fall. This is how we do it. Like this. So in training, first we loosen the body, and then we move to the next level. Next, I'll demonstrate Shihonage. We do it, usually in Shihonage, you enter this way. That's the way it's normally done. We do it like this. The reason we do it like this is in order to block a kick. This is how we perform the movement. Once again. Next, I'll show Ikkyo Ura. Rather than emphasize the martial arts perspective, I'll show exercises for training the legs and hips. We pin this way. We move completely around this way and then bring him down. I will now explain Katate Kirihanashi Gyaku Kiminage. This is a name that we have chosen ourselves. This is not a name in a formal sense. In this way, the uke learns how to react. That's what the training is for. Now I'll show the Katate Kirihanashi Nikyo. Now we'll move on to kotegaeshi. And now, I'll show Sankyo. Now we'll show Ryotedori throwing techniques. Perhaps we can call them applications. Next, we have Kokyunage. This name is used for various throwing techniques in Aikido. It's not really the kind of technique you can give a name to. Each of these techniques include things like atemi. You execute these throws with atemi. We call such techniques Kokyunage. Now I threw in this way. First, notice how this hand makes my partner raise up. Using this hand, we prevent the opponent from kicking. By doing this, he is not able to kick. Actually, my raising my hand here prevents him from striking. If we were doing karate, it would be like this. However, we don't do it this way. We enter, the hand enters. This is how we deal with his strike. However, we can't practice this way, so we do it like this. This is a Kokyunage throw. Now we will look at the Sodedori or sleeve grabbing techniques. We do Sodedori techniques in the same manner as Ikkyo, Nikkyo, etc. Now let's begin with Sodedori techniques. We enter this way, But since this is a martial art, you must be able to strike the opponent from here. We enter this way. This is a natural movement. My hand is in front and he can't reach me, but I can reach him. My hand is already here. When he moves, I already take his mind. Then I enter like this. Using this as the basis, I move like this. I enter like this. At this stage, he can't reach me. Usually, Sodedori Ikkyo is done like this. But this is dangerous. Most people do the technique this way. As I have said, this is very dangerous. The strike comes here, but when you release your hand, he won't wait for you. You don't let him do that. Now, he can't reach you. This is the way we do the Ikkyo. Next, I'll show Nikyo. And now, I'll demonstrate Sankyo. Next, we'll show joint locking techniques. In Aikido, it is said that we don't apply joint locking techniques. But since Aikido is a martial art, it is natural that it has such techniques. Today, I would like to show you two such techniques. Next, I'll show some choking techniques. I think there are a few choking techniques in Aikido. However, we do a few of these, and now I would like to show you two variations. First, I'll show an application where we enter from the sleeve and choke from the inside, and then a variation where we entwine his neck to apply the choke. Next, I'll show Kirihanashi Kotegaishi. There is a problem with this Kirihanashi movement. Most people move like this and expose themselves to a punch. Actually, there is a striking movement. We enter straight. In reality, we move like this. We push him away and strike while exhaling. So when we push him away like this, he can't strike. And then we enter this way. We push his hand away with this atemi. He's not able to punch with this hand. This is the way we execute the movement. We strike and enter this way. Once again. Now I'll show Ryo Sodedori Nikyo. With this, I'd like to conclude our presentation of Ryotedori and Sodedori techniques. In my explanations, I have shown how we include Ken and Jo applications in our practice. This is in accordance with what the founder meant when he said, whether you have a Ken or Jo in your hand, it is possible to create any martial art technique. I would like you to train keeping these words in mind. In our training, we, students of the founder, are trying to realize the meaning of these words. We still have a great deal to learn, but if what we have shown is of use, I would like you to consider and practice these things. With that, I would now like to conclude our demonstration of Ryotedori and Sodedori techniques. This is how we execute Irimi. Next, using this as the basis, we will present Kotegaishi, Nikyo, and Sankyo. Now we will move on to the practice of Kotegaishi. This Kotegaishi is exactly the same as the Irimi we did earlier. We use the same movement as we did for the Irimi we did before. There is almost no difference between this and the earlier Irimi. Now we will take a look at this technique with Ken versus Ken and Ken versus Jo. We will now move on to the Ken versus Ken and Ken versus Jo techniques. Allow me to explain this a little. The Jo is in this position, and we break the opponent's jaw. Naturally, a strike here follows. However, we can't practice in this way, so we parry to his head to subdue him. This is how it's done. Then we come here. This Jo movement is similar to the Nikyo. The same form directly applies to the sword. We come here and then enter. It is exactly the same as before. Next, we come here from below. It is almost the same as the opponent. That is how an attack is dealt with in Aikido. So in Aikido, we do not move from this point in the direction of the opponent. We open this way. The hand comes to here in this manner and enters this way. Naturally, if Aikido is based on the principles of the sword, it must be based on correct principles. Various entering movements with the sword begin from this form, where both opponents raise the sword at the same time and parry the opponent's attack. Then from this position, they enter, and their swords lower. But our way of doing the movement is different. We do not adopt a kamae or ready posture, we simply stand like this, so we can enter when the opponent lowers his sword. Naturally, we can enter directly from here. This is our way of executing irimi. We have already entered at this point. In this case of a usual punch, we can avoid it, but we don't do it this way. What we do when the opponent punches is to enter directly. We are in this position. If you do it this way, the opponent will not fall down. In our way of doing the technique, when he attacks with shomen, we enter like this from below. So when he comes with a punch, we enter here directly. So naturally, this hand can't attack me either. He can't build up this point, so it doesn't endanger his life. He becomes unable to utter a word. I will return to this point later. This is what atemi should be. This is what atemi should be in Japanese martial arts. That is the method of entering we use. I would now like to begin part 2 of this presentation of Shomenuchi techniques. I would like to demonstrate the second group of irimi techniques. I believe we are perhaps the only group who practices irimi in this way. Irimi is usually done like this. The sword is a bladed weapon. In karate, it is called uchi hidari ode. We refer to it as the mine, or back of the ken. In karate, it is referred to as soto hidari ode. This is completely different. When the opponent attacks our head, we execute the technique this way. We do it this way, moving like this. When we do the technique, we absolutely do not do it in this way. In our training, we absolutely do not push back at the opponent. In dealing with an attack in Aikido, we do not block or stop our Now we will move on to Shomenuchi Nikyo. With this technique as well, there are Ken versus Ken, Ken versus Jo, and sword drawing techniques. We perform this Nikyo in a manner similar to the Irimi and Kotegaishi we looked at earlier. Here, and then we turn. It's almost the same movement.